Peace, Brianna. What's good? What's good, G? Down in H-Town. What's happening with you? For sure. Yeah, we good. We good. How y'all doing, Brianna? We're gonna get rolling here in just a second. Let a couple more people get in. Oh, shit. This shirt gonna have bleach all over it. Fuck it. Yeah, that's an understatement. What's up, Charles? You out here? You back out here in the metro? All right. Peace, Mary. How you doing? Charles, you back for good or you just visiting? All right. I got some stuff I need to read, so I was trying to do the stuff first that I need to do with my hands. Um, oh, okay. Yeah, they drive crazy as hell out here. Without a doubt. So, when I was a kid coming up, um, we didn't get spankings. As a matter of fact, that was not even a term we used in our house, was a spanking. The only term was whooping. It's a big difference between a whooping and a spanking. Spanking was what you got at school. So yeah, I grew up in the era. Okay, they got a strategic plan here. So let me. Did y'all clean up upstairs? Huh? Okay. All right. Let's try this. So yeah, we got whoopings at home. Spanking was something they did at school. Um, but one thing I remember was my old man when he would wait, son, wait now. When he would whoop your butt, he would always sit down with you afterwards and explain to you why you got your butt whooped. Huh? Okay, all right, come on. All right. Hey, stop all that. Come on. Come on, rinse it off. Here, more. Put your thing right there. I'll hand it to you, and you're gonna put it up. That's enough. So he would explain to you why you got your butt whooped. Here, put it in. Put it in the rack. Rinse it off. All right. Now you give it to me. We give it to more. Put it in there. And by today's standards, I'm sure what we got would probably be considered just awful. They would definitely consider it child abuse. But stop. And I'm not as as hardcore on the corporal punishment as my old man was, but I do appreciate being disciplined. But that's not the point. The point is that with the severity of those butt whoopings, sometimes he would have to put something on us called Rosebud Salve. Now, if you're from the South and you're 40 or older, you might be familiar with something called Rosebud Salve, and it was like an ointment that here more here stand it up. Good, thank you. Okay, good. And you put it on you like if you had a skin rash. Here, put that over there. Oh, good. Thank you. If you had some type of little rash or some type of little wound or whatever, you put it on and it help you. It encourage healing. Okay. So the reason I titled this thing today, Rosebud Salve, because I look at this like this conversation, like when I go back and look at some of my video yesterday, I was a little animated and a little abrasive in some points. Peace, Tarza or Anessa. um, Stop, Henry. Stop, son. Okay. They got it. They got it. Um, so I would consider that as somewhat of a verbal, let's say a little spanking yesterday. And I call him this Rosebud Salve today because it's like a follow up, and it's like my version of after I would get my butt whooped. Uh, no, it ain't. I would sit down with my old man. He put that Rosebud Salve on, and we might sit out on the porch and eat some peanut butter crackers, and he might crack some jokes. And all right, boy, dry your face up. You know why you got your butt whooped? Here, eat one of these. And you reluctantly grab this little peanut butter cracker and eat it and whatever. And he get to talking to you about why. And today I want to kind of infuse that type of energy into the conversation about why such angst,
Okay, wait
about, I need you to put the steps up next. All right. Go put the steps up and we're going. You got something else for you to do. All right. Let's go. Go. Put them up. More. Put your step up. So I want to read some stuff to explain
why some of the approach I take to about, like you got to be careful about protecting your mind and so forth. If we, here, give a piece. There you go. Good. All right. So, peace. There we go. All right. It's that, damn, trying to get my train of thought. It's that, I'm just going to read this. I'm going to read these things. And this is something, this paper is called Emotions, Immunity, and Disease. Okay? A speculative theoretical integration. Can y'all hear me? This is by George F. Solomon, MD, and Rudolph H. Moose, PhD. And this paper came out in 1964. Now, I just want you to stop for a second and juxtapose this. 1964 is when this paper came out. It's very hard to get a hold of. 1964. Now, I want you to go back and think about 1964 in the world. 1964, we have the Civil Rights Act, right? Or Civil Rights Bill. It is like the midpoint or the pinnacle or the zenith, so to speak, of the civil rights movement. At the time that that's going on in the world, there are people who are producing a paper called The Emotions, Immunity, and Disease, a speculative theoretical integration. Something that 56 years later is still very relevant and pertinent. Okay? See, look right here. See that date on there? I can't see it. Look at that. 1964. Now, I just want to read a few little things I got highlighted from this because it's a relatively long document. It says, we shall review and analyze evidence that emotions play an important role in the pathogenesis of physical disease associated with immunological dysfunction, especially rheumatoid arthritis. Okay? Skip down. We shall see that onset, progression, and course of disease may be related to emotions. What the hell going on with this thing today? It won't. Okay. I don't want to stay up. All right. Okay. It further says, our major theoretical point is that autoimmunity may be related to relative immunological incompetence, and that such immunological incompetence in turn might be related to emotional stress and both anxious and depressive affect, which are associated with elevation of adrenal cortical steroid hormones. Now, adrenal cortical steroid hormones are part of the chemical messengers that are released when you're under stress. Okay? And that's all we'll say about that. All right? One more thing about those. They increase inflammation in the body when they are emitted if there is not physical activity or some other activity to move them about, or basically to utilize them. Okay? Skip down again. Experimental evidence of our position is developed. The poor antibody response of the schizophrenic is cited to exemplify the possible relationship of dysproteinemia to immunological dysfunction. The possibility is raised that early infantile stress can permanently affect later adrenal cortical responsiveness. And this is related to animal experimental data and to Burnett's clonal selection theory of immunity. Okay, backtrack. The possibility is raised that early infantile stress, that's talking about infantile, at birth through the very beginning stages of life, stress induced at birth through those first stages of life, which we call infancy, which is prior to toddler stage, okay, that going back that far. There's even evidence of prenatal things. There's a book called The Secret Life of Babies. It talks about how stress in the womb can set things in place. Okay. Negative things in place. Okay, I'm gonna skip to another section. I'm just doing this just to paint an initial picture. There is marked overlap in clinical. Well, no. The individual whose character structure has a large percentage of primary integrations arising out of mastery rather than restitution, presumably, would have a greater ability to tolerate and cope with stress than the individual of whose traits represent secondary integrations. Okay, got to read this again. The individual whose character structure has a large percentage of primary integrations arising out of mastery rather than restitution, presumably would have a greater ability to tolerate and cope with stress than the individual, most of whose traits represent secondary integrations. The nature of the entire ego trait structure, not only the presence or absence of specific characteristics, must be considered. Okay, let's put this in layman terms. The person who is more successful at mastering his or her mind or reality is more capable to handle stressors. The person who has a mechanism for utilizing these hormones is going to be more capable to preserve the life unit, which is this, okay, and to function better and flourish. That's what that's saying in essence, okay, versus the person who is reacting. 1964. There is marked overlap in clinical syndromes often associated with abnormal immunological factors, including, in addition to rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, thrombosis, that's clotting, thyroid disease, including thyroiditis, inflammation of the thyroid, hyper or hypothyroidism. Hyper is overreactive, hypo is underreactive, and Sjogren's syndrome. I don't know what that is. Dermatomyositis, inflammation of the skin, basically. Polymyositis, scleroderma, something else dealing with the skin. Acquired hemolytic anemia, ulcerative colitis, myasthenia gravis, and possibly others. So what it's saying is you don't necessarily have to have a specific, these things don't necessarily trigger a specific reaction, basically. it is overlapping, meaning that when emotions are triggered negatively, there are a myriad of problems that can emerge from it. Okay. Last, it is of considerable interest that personality data similar to those we and others have reported for patients with rheumatoid arthritis have been published for patients with some of the aforementioned diseases. See, Engel, in his classical studies of ulcerative colitis, refers to obsessive compulsive character traits of conscientiousness, neatness, indecision, conformity, over intellectualization, rigid morality, and worrying. That's just one example. Okay, now I want to go to something else. Okay, I want to go to this book, The Healing Brain, a scientific reader, The Healing Brain. Sit down. Okay, note, copyright on this book is 1990. Okay, remember that, because they're going to talk in here from the standpoint of them making discoveries. But what they're discovering in this book is not new. As a matter of fact, it wasn't new in 1964. It was even known in 1564. In the 16th century or 17th century, something was introduced called Cartesian medicine. Cartesian medicine is the version of medicine that we are under now, where it's a more mechanistic approach to the body, where things are seen as separated and dissected and so forth. Well, pre-Cartesian medicine is what this is basically saying that they're discovering, what this is going to say it discovers, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I know that's kind of a spoiler, but I want to give that as some backdrop information. I'm reading from a section called The Biochemistry of the Emotions. It says the receptors for the neuropeptides. Now, a neuropeptide is a small protein-like substance that's produced and releases and released by hormones, by neurons. I'm sorry. Again, neuropeptide is a small protein-like substance produced and released by neurons. When we're talking about neurons, we're talking about the nervous system and the brain. All right. So the receptors for the neuropeptides are in fact the keys to the biochemistry of emotion. In the past 2 years, the workers in my lab have formalized this idea in a number of theoretical papers. Blah, blah, blah. Skip down. I will begin by noting a fact that neuroscientists have agreed on for a long time, that emotions are mediated by the limbic system of the brain. The limbic system is where controls memory, long-term memory, a limbic system. Okay. The limbics, and this is the part that deteriorates when Alzheimer's develops. Okay. The limbic system refers to a section of neuroanatomical parts of the brain, which include the hypothalamus, which controls the homeostatic mechanisms of the body and is sometimes called the brain of the brain. The pituitary gland, which regulates the hormones in the body, and the amygdala. Now, yesterday I talked about the tower, okay? I talked about it tracing back to Tyre. But in Hebrew, get this, the word for tower is migdala. M-G-D-L, or migdal. Migdal. Now that sounds a lot like the root of Magdalene. That's another discussion. Either way, we will be talking mostly about the hypothalamus and the amygdala. The experiments showing the connection between emotions and the limbic system were first done by Wilder Penfield and other neurologists who worked with conscious, awake individuals. The neurologists found that when they used electrodes to stimulate the cortex over the amygdala, they could evoke, listen to this, a whole gamut of emotional displays, powerful reactions of grief, of pain, of pleasure associated with profound memories, and also the total somatic accompaniment of emotional states. The limbic system was first identified then by psychological experiments. I said I would. I said that's for another conversation, but I need to touch on this. I'm gonna take scholastic liberty here to say that the amygdala, tracing back to migdal, which is tower in Hebrew, that based on what was just said here, what I just read, how the cortex over this portion of the brain can stimulate all these emotions, that it works like a transfer tower that we have in our cities. You think about that movie, The Signal, okay? Sending this signal out. All right, let's keep going. The amygdala and the hypothalamus, both classically considered to be the main components of the limbic system. The great physiologist Walter B. Cannon singled out the hypothalamus as the foremost area for emotions to hook up to the brain, are in fact blazing with opiate receptors, 40-fold higher than any other areas in the brain. These hotspots correspond to very specific nuclei or cellular groups that physiological psychologists have identified as mediating such processes as sexual behavior, appetite, and water balance in the body. The main point is that our receptor mapping confirmed and expanded in important ways the psychological experiments that define the limbic system. Let me backtrack a moment and bring in some other neuropeptides. I have already noted that 50 to 60 substances are now considered to be neuropeptides. Where do they come from? Many of them are the natural analogs of psychoactive drugs. But another major source, very unexpected, is hormones. Hormones historically have been conceived of as being produced by glands. In other words, not by nerve cells. A hormone presumably was stored in one place in the body, then traveled over to its receptors to other parts of the body. The prime hormone is insulin, which is secreted in the pancreas. But now it turns out that insulin is not just a hormone. In fact, insulin is a neuropeptide made and stored in the brain. And there are insulin receptors in the brain. When we map insulin, we again find hotspots in the amygdala and hypothalamus. In short, it has become increasingly clear that the limbic system, the seat of emotions in the brain, is also the focal point of receptors for neuropeptides. Now, this is how you have to learn how to read between the lines. This information is describing how the body in multiple ways can be weaponized. Most give you this example because they brought up insulin. Most people from other countries don't have a huge incidence of diabetes. It is when people become Americanized that they become more susceptible to diabetes. And it's not just the food. It's the culture. It's the environment. The environment of you got to keep up. You got to go. Cutthroat. It's about me. It's about me. It's about me. My worth is based on how much I can consume. And on and on. What this just said gives credence to what I just said. That is not just that the environment, just like the book Biology of Belief, the environment can contribute to failed health. It's crazy. You want some more? Turn that down some, Henry. Uh, Again, I'll read this last sentence. In short, it has become increasingly clear that the limbic system, the seat of emotions in the brain, is also the focal point of receptors for neuropeptides. Just gave Peacewise Feminine. That it's they just gave you a playbook. Okay. This is rather lengthy here. Let me read this part. Okay. I believe these findings have amazing implications for understanding and appreciating what emotions do and what they are about. Consider the chemical substance angiotensin. Now, angiotensin is a protein hormone that causes blood vessels to narrow. Now, its function when balanced is to help maintain blood pressure and fluid balance. So that means when it is out of whack, what can it do? Contribute to high blood pressure. Now, what's so interesting about this is that the amygdala and hypothalamus are heavily influenced by fear and anger. Now, let's just go back a few months and think about these two emotions being on the forefront. Right, vasoconstriction. The outbreak, we'll call it that, earlier a couple of months back. Fear. Okay? The recent incidents, anger, fear, and anger. Now, both incidents have had some form of a lockdown. One was very extensive. And while people were locked down, they're in their house, right? I want to see if I can find this. I don't know if we threw it away. Well, anyway, I don't see it, but we had saved this. We buy these nuts from Costco, um, and this pack of mixed nuts, and it just so happened we kept a old container around for some reason, and it was sitting over here on the counter, and we had a new container. For some reason, something told me to look. No, I know why I looked at the back, because I thought, man, these peanuts, these mixed nuts taste. What's up, BK Trainer? Peace. What's what happened was I was eating those nuts, and I was like, man, these things salty as hell. I said, they ain't never been this salty. So I went and looked at the back of it to see how much sodium was in it. Well, it happened to be 5 grams more than the container that we had sitting on the counter. And that couldn't have been no more than maybe a month or so old. So that means who knows how much they've been increasing the sodium incrementally And we just ain't been paying attention to it. So needless to say, we just don't fool with them no more. But with people's, let me just read this again. Let me read this. I believe these findings have amazing implications for understanding and appreciating that emotions do what emotions do and what they are. Consider the chemical substance angiotensin, another classic hormone that is also a peptide and now shown to be a neuropeptide. No, what I was referring to was back here. It control. What did I say? The uh, These hotspots correspond to very specific nuclei or cellular groups that physiological psychologists have identified as mediating such processes as sexual behavior, appetite, and water balance in the body. Okay, I read that. Now we're back to angiotensin, another classic hormone that is also a peptide and now shown to be a neuropeptide. When we map for angiotensin receptors in the brain, we again find little hotspots in the amygdala. It has long been known that angiotensin mediates thirst. So if one implants a tube in the area of a rat's brain that is rich with angiotensin receptors and drops a little angiotensin down the tube, within 10 seconds the rat will start to drink water, even if it is totally sated with water. Chemically speaking, angiotensin translates as an altered state of consciousness, a state that makes animals and humans say, I want water. In other words, neuropeptides bring us to states of consciousness and to alterations in these states. Now, this is what I want to say about this, though. Your brain may register that I want water, but you may not pick up that I want water. This is something I learned a long time ago with training people, that a lot of times people eat because they're thirsty. They eat because they're dehydrated. So if you taking in Peace Tracy, uh if you're taking in a bunch of uh this fake salt, then you know it triggers you to want to drink, to well, basically it dehydrates you. But if you don't know that you're dehydrated, you can get a false reading that you're hungry, and guess what? End up eating more salt and other detrimental things. So it's diabolical. To list another example, we have in the laboratory mapped the receptors for PCP, commonly referred to as angel dust, a drug of abuse that induces an altered state of consciousness. Using radioactive PCP, we have shown that the receptors tend to be in the brain cortex, and with rats as our subjects, we have been able to determine, using the technique of operant animal behavior, that we are in fact measuring the peptide molecules of PCP that are responsible for an altered state of consciousness. Equally important is the fact that neuropeptide receptors are not just in the brain, they are also in the body. We have mapped and shown biochemically that there are angiotensin receptors in the kidney, identical to those in the brain, and in a way that is not yet quite understood, the kidney located receptors conserve water. We know that they play with the ion fluxes so that water is conserved. The point is that the release of the neuropeptide angiotensin leads both to the behavior of drinking and to the internal conservation of water. All right. I want to skip down. He says, my basic speculation here is that neuropeptides provide the physiological basis for the emotions. As my colleagues and I argued in a recent paper in the Journal of Immunology, the striking pattern of neuropeptide receptor distribution in mood regulating areas of the brain, as well as their role in mediating communication throughout the whole organism, makes neuropeptides the obvious candidates for the biochemical mediation of emotion. So we can deduce that if I can affect your emotions on a consistent basis, then I can inhibit communication within your body, because nerves, neurons, neuropeptides are means of communication. You have an internet. You are the original internet. You have an intranet inside of you, and this is all these. Your body is conscious. It is conscious. Each part has its own consciousness, and they are communicating with each other. So one way one thing that could be done if somebody were this diabolical is attempt to disrupt the ability, your natural ability to internally communicate. To go further, it says, basically, I have to sum that up, that they say it can affect your immune system. All right. Now, let's start looking at how can some just practical things that you can do to respond. Okay. And this shows, this is about exercise. Exercise places a major challenge on the body due to the increased energy needs and physiological demands put upon the body's nervous, muscular, cardiovascular, metabolic, and respiratory systems. Hey. Okay, calm down, y'all. For example, hormones can increase blood pressure, stimulate protein synthesis, and increase the body's metabolic rate. Skipping around. Hormones are released from a number of traditional glands. This is still on the gland thing, but we know basically it's beyond that. So exercise, if we know that hormones actually are in the brain as well, then there's plenty of proof that shows how vigorous exercise affects brain function. And now we know, since hormones are neuropeptides, that influences hormonal expression, which can then improve your immune system. Hormones are released from a number of adrenal glands, such as the pituitary, testes, ovaries, pancreas, thyroid, and adrenal cortex. More recently, science has also documented hormone secretion from non-traditional sites such as the heart, kidney, liver, and adipose tissue. All right. These hormones increase. They're talking about epinephrine and norepinephrine, two hormones released when you do resistance exercise. These hormones increase blood glucose and are important for increasing force production, muscle contraction rate, and energy production, which is ATP. These hormones actually begin to rise prior to the resistance training workout. Consciousness. That's a form of consciousness. They rise even before, in anticipation of you exercising. The elevated blood glucose levels do not typically lead to an increase in insulin. Okay, so it's a positive blood glucose elevation. Regular exercise, resistance exercise training has been shown to increase insulin sensitivity. You want to be insulin sensitive. That means when it is emitted by the pancreas, your body has receptors that are ready to utilize it. Okay. I'm going to stop right there because the natives are restless. Okay, so that's one. Shows you importance, huh? Okay, go ahead. I'm coming. The importance of exercise. Now I want to read you something about a particular hormone called oxytocin. The bonding hormone. Oxytocin is a hormone that is made in the hypothalamus and released into the blood by the pituitary gland. It plays a role in pro-social behavior, sexual reproduction, and during and after childbirth. It evokes feelings of contentment, calmness, security, and reductions in anxiety level. Oxytocin inhibits brain areas associated with behavioral control of fear and anxiety and protect against stress. Come back down here, pick it up. Get down here and pick it up. Okay, I gotta wrap this up. Oxytocin inhibits brain areas. We'll come back and do a part 2 of this and finish it up.